I'm Judy Jackson. This is a talk I gave at the Spanish and Portuguese Sephardi synagogue at Lauderdale Road. It was part of a series, 12 women from our community talking about 12 notable women they admire. This is a picture of Jennifer, taken with her famous father, the band leader Joe Loss.
Judy Jackson is a writer. She's published 6 cookbooks, 2 novels, and a memoir. She writes a twice weekly food blog with photographs called The Armchair Kitchen, has a YouTube channel with over 65 videos under the name Granny Judy Cooks. Okay, if you haven't had a look at that yet, highly recommended. Subscribe and enjoy. Okay, Judy is going to be speaking about Jennifer Jankel, who is the only woman in this series who is still alive. So we look forward to that.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm speaking today about Jennifer Jankel. And as Diane Carter said, my choice is unusual in that she's the only one of the 12 notable women who has a live, active, and is not a historical figure. It's likely that you've never heard of her. I'm looking around the room. It is most likely, so don't feel bad if you haven't heard of her. Why is that? She has risen to the top of 3 totally different organizations, but never sought publicity or even acknowledged that she's done something herself that's remarkable. That's why I'm glad to come and tell you her story today. Jennifer is a hugely successful woman. Her position now is at the head of JMI, the Jewish Music Institute. Their motto is transforming lives through Jewish music. And they do this by putting on worldwide events, offering bursaries to young musicians, drawing in the crowds at an annual klezmer event in Regent's Park, and exploring every aspect and origin of what might be called the soundtrack to Jewish life. Jen was born in 1940, the daughter of Joe Loss, the most famous band leader. Some of you might remember him. Often considered the Glenn Miller of English dance halls. She was brought up with a traveling father and a mother who, although devoted, was also often absent, going with her husband to the various gigs that he was doing. From her earliest years, though, she had a love of synagogue and music, going to Great Portland Street and spending time at clubs in the East End, helping with youth, etc. When she was 16, she left St. Paul's Girls' School because the teachers didn't rate her very highly. They didn't think she would do well in A-levels. So she left and went to the Lycée Français de Londres, did a commercial course, and after 3 years, she came out with a certificate showing that she had mastered French shorthand, as well as bookkeeping, French history, and literature. Her first job was as a bilingual secretary in an international shoe company called Charles Jourdan. Now, here's the surprising bit. At the age of 29, Jen became managing director of this shoe company. How did this happen? Well, from starting work at 19, she made it part of her job to find out every aspect of the business, especially public relations and marketing. It was through this that she made friends with the fashion editors of Vogue and the newspapers of the day. In one article, the Daily Express quoted her as being managing director of Jourdan, but she wasn't. She did have a couple of assistants by this time, but she stopped and thought, I'm doing the job. Why couldn't I be managing director? She spoke to her boss in Paris and put the idea to him, and he just agreed. She came out of the conversation in charge of one of the most influential and successful shoe companies in the world. She learned a lot from the three brothers who owned the company. Always willing to listen, she was curious to learn and keen on detail. She would be flying on Concorde to New York and then back to the French office by the Seine in Paris. She helped to establish a new and stunning store in Knightsbridge and worked tirelessly for years, building the brand till now. Examples of their shoes are even in a collection at the V&A, Victoria and Albert Museum. As part of the executive of Jourdain, she was made vice president. And then in 1987, she decided to break away to start her own company called Luc Bergen, making shoes in Italy. Now, I'm not going to go on anymore about shoes, but just to tell you that that was a success too. With Jewish women, you can never separate family and other life. Both have to be accommodated. So before I go on to tell you the second great achievement in Jen's life, I want to tell you about what was happening at home. She married Robert Jankel, and they had 3 sons. Robert had a great talent for both design and construction. Early in their marriage, he bought a wrecked sports car. He cut it in half and kept the undamaged front part. He then went in search of a matching back part, which he then meticulously attached to make a perfect vehicle. This was the beginning of his success in building and selling prestigious cars. He ended up with limousines, armored cars, and something called the Panther, which were amazing things. He completely rebuilt a classic 1930s Rolls-Royce and started his business as a result of selling that one car to a bullfighter who met on a trip to Spain. When Jen married Robert, they lived in a small house in Hampstead Garden suburb. But Robert had always wanted to live in the country. One day he went out and he came back with a surprising comment. He told her that he'd seen a mock Tudor house in Walton-on-Thames and that he'd almost completed the sale on it without even consulting her. Luckily, she loved it and the totally different life that it brought her. They joined an Orthodox synagogue in Kingston-on-Thames. This was 10 miles from their new home. So the days of walking to shul came to an end. She used to go to Great Portland Street Synagogue and also in Hampstead Garden Suburb, another synagogue. But it was there then that there were moves to start a new synagogue in their local area. Working with a charismatic man called Harry Cohen, who later became the first president of the synagogue they were to found and also the headmaster of the Hebrew school, he and Jen sent out a flyer asking for people to join. Who did he send them to? Anybody in the phone book that had a Jewish name, Jacob, Israel, Cohen, Levi. And this was the beginning of Jen's involvement with synagogue life, during which she was voted chairman 3 times and continues to this day as president. Now, Northwest Surrey Synagogue began with 20 families. Today, there are more than 300. Jen was one of the founding members. She pays tribute to her mentor, Harry Cohen, telling me this: he allowed all of us to grow and flourish. Many of the early members had experience of Nazi persecution. We worked with them, bringing back beauty and sweetness into their lives, building a sukkah in the garden behind the synagogue. Much later, Jen helped to establish something called the Care and Share team. What did this involve? From listening to each other, learning Jewish texts, and supporting the bereaved, members are also encouraged to go out into the local community, sharing these skills with non-Jewish organizations. And this is continuing now. So at this stage of my story, you'll realize that Jen understood not only the details of running a company, but also how to deal with people. She has never chased after fame, money, or status. It's no secret. She just loves people. She loves talking to them, getting involved with their lives, hearing about their problems. As her new community grew, Jen was welcoming and generous. Almost every Shabbat, she had guests at her table, providing copious amounts of food, conjured up with little help in the hours between leaving her office, which was now in the grounds of her home, and rushing out to Friday night service. By this time, they had moved again to a larger house in Weybridge with farmland. They even toyed with the idea of rearing a herd of deer to get kosher venison. They certainly had the deer. I'm not sure whether any meat ever went on sale. But with both of them working full-time, they took a brave decision to add to their family of 3 sons, Paul, Andrew, and Mark. They had come to know a young family with a couple with a young daughter called Danny. The family were having serious emotional difficulties, and Jen and Robert agreed with them on a partial adoption so that Danny could come to live with them on a permanent basis. And from that day on, she has been a part of Jen's family. Over the years, Jen has had great joy and great sadness in her family. Within 3 years, she suffered the deaths of those closest to her, her mother, her adored mother-in-law, and her beloved husband, Robert. They were all nursed at home, and this ended in 2007. With Jen's immense positivity, she got through this challenging period. And I don't know if you'd be surprised, but 3 months later, she conceived of a new venture, joining JMI as a trustee, which takes us full circle back to where I started, the fact that she is now at the top of the Jewish Music Institute. A scholarship had been endowed in the name of Joe Loss, her father, at SOAS, to commemorate and honor his musical achievements. Jen often says how happy he would be to know that his daughter, who never played a musical instrument, became vice president of JMI. She is one of the most remarkable people I know, and I think hearing about her, you may think so also. Now, just as a little afterthought, you might be wondering how I know so much about Jen. I too went to St. Paul's Girls' School. I also went to the French Lycée, though in the academic stream and not the commercial one. But I did learn French shorthand, and my first job was also as a bilingual secretary.